Hey, MOMnation. Welcome to Mental Wealth with Laura Wood and Katie Holly Lambert, where we talk through generational trauma so we can leave a new legacy for our children. Counselor Laura is with Benevieri Counseling out of Chandler, Arizona, and you can find her on Facebook, on the web, or by the link in the show notes. We hope you enjoy the show. Yay! Hey, Laura.
Hey there.
How's it going?
It's going so good. How are you?
Awesome. Doing well. Love to see
Mhm.
you as always. And hey there, everybody. We are back with our monthly episode of Mental Wealth. And I just love this show. And I always look so forward to chatting with you because I always learn so much. Even though we know each other and we chat about these things, I mean, we can get on a roll.
Time. Yeah, we can because there's so many things and there's so many ideas and there's no finished final answer. It's evolving always.
Always evolving, moving
Yeah,
target. I totally agree.
absolutely.
So for those of you who maybe this is your first episode, maybe you're not really sure who we are or what we do here, but Laura and I are here every month, and the show is called Mental Wealth. And the reason why we call it that is basically it's like leaving your legacy, right? And oftentimes we think of that as monetary, as money wealth. But Laura and I thought, well, dang, leaving behind your habits, your
Mhm.
mindset, all of that stuff, reasons why you do things, like all of that is part of that as well, because kids are paying attention
Mm-hmm.
and they're going to pick up on those things, and they're going to,
Yeah.
I mean, you're a therapist. How often, and I probably know this answer, do kids repeat those patterns and begin to, maybe they didn't go through the traumas themselves that shaped the
Mm-hmm.
way that their parents behave or the way their parents think or the actions that their parents take, but they can adopt those things too, right?
Yeah, absolutely. We pass them down in more ways than just behaviorally. It's a biological reaction to stress. If we have a tendency to, get anxious, like we pass down that pattern. And if we have a tendency to be, stressed, or I'm sorry, depressed when we're stressed, we pass that down too. So it's not just there is no nature versus nurture. It is both all the time. And so we really can be mindful of how we are teaching our kids how to work through things. I hear the kids side of it, right? Saying things all the time, calling out, you know, my mom or dad says this and but they don't even do that, or whatever. Like kids recognize and identify hypocrisy so fast.
And so well.
And so well, we're all really guilty of it, right? As parents, like, do as I say, not as I do, because I'm not a perfect person and I'm going to try to tell you how to do it the right way, even though I can't do it the right way. So like, but kids notice that and they call that out, which always makes me laugh. But the truth is, they don't have to experience trauma to learn how to cope with the world in the same way that you cope with the world because of your trauma.
Right.
So all of our personalities essentially develop as adaptations to our environment. So if your environment is projecting a sense of stress and chaos and urgency and emergency, and if those are things that you're experiencing all the time, well, that's what your kids are experiencing too, right? So we really can pass along that legacy of distress and that sense of helplessness and out of control. And we can also change that, and we don't have to pass that down, which is super cool. And we can change it for free if we just do it. And the resources can be, some resources are expensive, some are not, some are just free, like this, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And there's just a lot that we can change, and that can change the trajectory of our kids' lives and their kids' lives.
Completely agree. And I have a personal example. I don't know if I ever mentioned this to you, but back when I was growing up, I had a caregiver that for some reason, and I still to this day don't know why, but for some reason, this person would get anxious, angry, short during holidays.
Mm-hmm.
And for whatever reason, like I said, I don't know what those reasons are. However, fast forward several years in my adult life, start realizing that during holidays I'm anxious
Right.
and angry and short. And I stopped to think about it one day, and well, I've been in therapy for quite a long time. So
Right.
I
Yeah.
maybe didn't stop to think about it on my own. Somebody might help me out. Um, but I stopped to think about it and I was like, wow, I'm actually really excited about this upcoming holiday. And I'm really excited to have, to enjoy it with my kiddo and my spouse and our
Yeah.
family. Why in the world am I creating this anxious sort of atmosphere?
Yeah.
And that's what I ended up discovering.
Yeah. We sort of just do the same things. Everything is a reenactment. Because that's how we learned how to handle it. Like, oh, I guess this is stressful.
Mm-hmm.
Why would I think it's not stressful if my caretakers or, the people in my life who are showing me the world, if they think it's stressful, I will most likely feel stressed. Like,
Right.
right. And so if you kind of imagine, and kids then go out into the world and they have access to things like social media, and they have access to other kids at school and teachers and other representative people in their lives, and they learn things there too. But those sort of instinctual reactions, those initial tendencies towards emergency or command and control, or like those do tend to repeat themselves. And they also, it's funny that they kind of begin to show up at different ages and stages. Just because we don't do it that way when we're a kid, like we get more and more adult-like. And as our adult brains develop into adult brains with the foundation that we had as kids, then we're going to start reenacting those same patterns too, right? So like as parents, I can say like, well, my kid is totally nothing like me, right? Like I'm really high strung, but they're so aloof or whatever, right? That doesn't mean they're going to stay that way. That doesn't mean that they're going to maintain that like while they're out on their own in a different environment, like without the dynamic of you in their house. It's possible that their adaptation will be more likely, will be different once that dynamic changes, where they're on their own or where they're with a partner or something like that, right? So you can't really predict what kind of unhelpful things they're going to learn from you.
Mm-hmm. Until it
I sort of
happens.
say it's a little bit of a crapshoot, right? Like I say this all the time. None of us get out of this unscathed. Really, we're not going to. This process of adulting and raising other people and this, development is a pretty complex process.
Mm-hmm.
So nobody is going to not learn anything unhealthy or unhelpful. That's not real. But we just can't pick and choose. So we want to try to address the things that we know in ourselves are causing harm to our relationships, to our relationship first with ourself,
Big.
and then our relationship to others, right? So if we know that this thing that we're dealing with is causing us harm, we can know that it's also causing our children harm. No matter how much we try to hide it or think that we're putting them first, or dedicating our resources to them, when whatever is happening inside of us absolutely has an impact, both positively and negatively, on our kids, because they are so dependent on us that they have a keen biological, neurological connection to our state. So our state, meaning I'm distressed, I'm anxious, I'm scared, I'm sad, I'm helpless. When we embody those states and sort of let them become what we are, instead of move through those states and notice that those are what we're feeling, then we're sort of creating that same sense of state dependence in our kids. When we move through states, knowing that, oh, I'm feeling anxious, I'm feeling helpless, I'm feeling this way, and that's temporary, that's not, I'm not that, then we can sort of remove that disposition, right? Like because our kids are going to just try to know what they can do to be okay around us.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we're embodying these states, then our kids are sensing these states, and like that's a state that they need to be really careful about or aware of or whatever, versus like, I'm feeling this way. That sort of like separates the kid from it, and they can experience you as a person feeling a feeling and not really have to take that on as much. If that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I love what you said kind of way back about it may not show up until a certain point in their life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Once they're adults.
Once they become adults, because we're also teaching them, we're teaching them a whole variety of things, right? But we're also teaching them how to be adults. And I feel like that's a great transition into our specific topic for today, because I know that a lot of women, just a lot of moms, a lot of women that I've talked to throughout the years or seeing posts and everything, either in our group or out there online, share that, well, their identity was sort of shaped by being a mother, by being a wife, by being, whatever they do for work, like all of that stuff.
Yeah.
But then once motherhood's over, now I know it's never actually over, but once your kids are adults and they're kind of, on their own, and you're not doing that intense momming anymore, they have trouble finding themselves and really pursuing their own passions, figuring out what those passions are, and doing it without guilt, which I think is really difficult. Now, in my personal situation, I sat and thought about the topic today, and it's terrifying to me for my son to be 18 and to be, or however old he, goes off into the world. Maybe it'll be 40 and he'll stay with me forever. But it's terrifying for me, because then I thought, well, what then? Who am I at that point? And I personally, not attacking any of my caretakers or any of the adults that were in my life growing up or still are. I don't know the steps to that, Laura.
Sure.
I just was thinking really deeply about it today, and I thought you might have some really great advice for me.
Well, I mean, I think that's totally understandable, right? We don't see our caretakers when we're kids, right? We don't see our adults as separate people than us. So we don't recognize that they have an outside life. We don't recognize that they have needs and experiences that don't have anything to do with us.
Or even that they were alive and before us.
Yeah. I mean, it's everything that we do has in the relationship with a child, from the child's perspective. So this isn't objectively true, but from a child's perspective, everything that we do is in some way related to our feelings about that child, our connection to that child.
Right.
So for example, you're working and not paying attention to me, you don't care about me. Well, that's obviously not true. We have to have jobs. Like,
yeah.
I like
Earth, that's
food in the house, right? So those are things we have to sort of help our families understand. So we can help our kids recognize that sense of separateness. But most of the time, that's just not something that's known. So we don't really learn how to do that, right? Because that's never been a part of our experience. to sort of individuate from our parent.
Mm-hmm.
And as we're kids, our concept of ourself is dependent on the response we get from others. And so if we're getting good feedback, we're good. If we're getting bad feedback, we're bad. And we're never really fully satisfied or fulfilled as a whole autonomous human being. Because we're kids, we're not autonomous. We're sort of separate. We're like dependent, right?
Right.
So when we transition to adulthood, we have to sort of recognize ourselves differently, recognize ourselves as a whole, dynamic, autonomous, valuable human outside of the context of our relationship of others, outside of the way that others respond to us, outside of the way we make other people feel, or outside of the things we do for other people. But more on the inside, giving ourselves a sense of purpose and autonomy and a sense of mastery, right? So I think I've said this on here before, but internal motivation versus external, right? We talk about an internal locus of control versus an external locus, or internal motivation versus external motivation. So do I do things because of me on the inside, or do I do things because of results on the outside? Most of us have both, right? We're both somewhere in there. But the ingredients to internal motivation, which for reasons that may or may not be obvious to many of us is really important. Internal motivation is really important, right? We can't always depend on what's happening on the outside to help us feel better on the inside.
Mm-hmm.
So internal motivation has 3 ingredients. It has purpose, autonomy, and mastery. So as a whole dynamic person, we have to have purpose, autonomy, and mastery outside of the context of our relationships with others. And so that's a big transition for most of us.
Yeah.
Especially moms.
Yeah. Mom's in the mom guilt.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which is also a bit debilitating.
Mm-hmm. It certainly can be. And so balance is always the answer, right? There's never 100%. We're never 100% anything.
Mm-hmm.
We're always wrestling with competing priorities and sacrifices versus rest. And we have to let that be okay. And as we let that be okay, and we don't depend on our child's well-being for our own well-being, we're releasing them from that relationship dependence so that they can go be okay outside of the context of their relationship. So we give them the freedom and permission to be a whole person that is not a representation of their relationships to others, and that their goodness or badness doesn't depend on feedback from anyone else. We do that when we stop depending on them for our own well-being, right? Our child's well-being cannot dictate our own well-being. And that is very hard.
It is very hard. I just recently had lunch with a friend over the summer, and the friend was sharing that their 20-something-year-old kid has gotten into drugs, gotten with the wrong crowd, actually committed a felony, and was really taking this on really heavy, and was saying things like, I didn't raise him that way. I didn't think I made mistakes like that. I didn't. And I just wanted to reach in and just, hug that poor heart that was obviously in a lot of pain. But at what point do we at what point does it make sense to release yourself from that? Like, I can not relate, but I can understand why they maybe were feeling that way and probably still do. In feeling that sort of sense of responsibility. How much responsibility is healthy to feel about your adult child?
I think first of all, listen to the term adult child. No answer is going to make sense.
Right.
Right. So like, that's the thing. There is no perfect answer here. There's no appropriate burden that is somehow measurable, right? Like it's always our fault and it's not our responsibility all at the same time.
Right.
So there's really no perfect answer here. Because I have adult children as well. And so I can relate to the sense of, responsibility for the actions of the child. So here's the difference. This is kind of where I draw the line. And I'm not awesome at this either. So just to be clear, like these are theories here. These are best case scenario, foundational understanding, right? Of like what could be helpful is when you're raising the child, we need to give them a sense of independence, a sense of autonomy. We need to offer them their age appropriate decisions to make and let them fail. While we're raising the child, we need to let them sort of make some decisions that are age appropriate. So while we're letting them do that, make mistakes, be successful, right? We're saying that's great. And then when they make a mistake or they fall, we're saying, hey, I caught you. I'm the spot. And so that when you're not with me, you'll know that even though you made a mistake, I still am going to love you. And you have to still live with the consequence of that mistake.
Mm-hmm.
I can't take away the consequences for you, but I can teach you and I can catch you so that the consequences are not so bad while you're a child. And then you'll continue to learn and do those things differently. And as long as we are supporting the child in becoming themselves, not becoming our hopes.
Right. That's a big thing.
Yeah. Not becoming what we thought they were going to be, not becoming what we wanted them to be. But when we invest in them becoming themselves, that's when we can say, I gave you what I had, and I am compassionate, and I am always going to love you no matter what you do. And I always believe that you deserve love and respect no matter what you do. And those actions are not okay. And that's very upsetting. And we can work through this together. And these consequences are going to be really serious.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not a reflection. Like my actions don't, again, like state, I am not this. I experienced this. I am not, a bad person. I did something that was objectively bad. And therefore, there are consequences that I now have to deal with. That doesn't make me inherently bad or anything. It's just like I am not my actions, and I'm also not my feelings. I am a dynamic individual who does both good and bad things, and also some neutral stuff too. And that's the way the cookie crumbles.
Mm-hmm.
Like life shakes out in a way that it shakes out. And we just have to show our kids that we love them. And that means they can love themselves as themselves. And when people love themselves as themselves, they don't go out and hurt other people because they don't need to.
Right. And, something that you said in there, I really latched onto, and that was allowing your child to fail age appropriately.
Right.
I think that a lot of people, myself included, have a hard time with that.
Same.
A hard time with
We're
seeing
all
them
same.
fail,
Yeah. It's really hard. Sucks. I mean, and I don't think that we're all guilty of rescuing, right? We've all rescued probably too many times, but we can recognize that we don't need to rescue when we see capability in our child. So think about it this way. The more I rescue, the more I send the message that that child is incapable of handling the world on their own.
That's a good point.
And that's not what we mean by that, but that's the message we're sending. And so I think that, so for me, that's how I have to look at it. In order to stop rescuing my kids, because I'm a solver, look at my personality, right? I get things done. I solve problems. I help people. I figure stuff out. I support people. I move forward. I can't just be like, oh yeah, you're going through a really hard time. You know, like what?
Right.
For me,
It's not your personality. Yeah.
that's because of who I am, right? So I have to recognize, okay, my personality traits are going to be helpful for him to learn from. However, he doesn't need rescuing because he is not helpless. So I am imposing my own values and helpfulness as if I'm essentially robbing him of his autonomy by saying, you need me to help you. You need me to rescue you. And I'm teaching, this is called learned helplessness. And learned helplessness is an experience that a lot of people, children, are adolescents, that we're seeing this learned helplessness a lot. And that's something that my kids have experienced at one point or another because of my overly eager helpfulness. So I have to take a step back and I have to say, okay, you are capable. So we're going to do it together, or, right? Like, we're going to help you get there. So I'm going to support you I'm just going to be in the room with you when that's going on, right? Like if you have to take, maybe you have to go to the doctor and that's something you're afraid of. I'm going to go and I'm going to be in the waiting room, even though you're an adult and you can drive yourself. I'm going to go because I'm going to be here to support you, but I know that you can do it yourself and you won't need me to do that forever. Right? So like, we're showing I believe in you. And so I'm not going to save you. I'm not going to rescue you because that's not what you need. You're not helpless. You have autonomy.
Right. And when we're doing that, when we're saving constantly and not allowing that, we're definitely not setting them up to be independent adults. Do you think that maybe some of us do it even without knowing it to prolong that feeling of need?
Yeah, for sure.
Why do we as women and moms hang on that so much? And that's what I think our topic is about, because that's our identity.
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel that way?
I think, yeah, I mean, I think there's so many answers to this question. I think, first of all, culturally, societally, we do create a significant amount of sort of expectation of service. You know, I think there's a big expectation of service from girls and women. Just because I think we just see that way. We want women to be courteous and kind and you know, not cause a fuss, not be like high maintenance, not be extra. We really do sort of, even if it's covert, right? We sort of have this sense that women and girls should be the bigger person, should be the quiet one, even though, and like, let the things go by, like be, you know, take a back seat, don't emasculate a man, right? Like those are kinds of, so it's like, I think we sort of put that on us, or, and that is a hard thing. And so because of that, and then other things that we go through in our lives, like our sense of childhood, this could be true for both dads and moms, or any person who sort of like is a rescuer, right? Like we have a lot of those, that's some of our personalities as rescuers come from the sense that when we are helping, that's when we got the best feedback.
Yeah.
Right. So if we were being good, that's us being good. We're getting good feedback. We're good enough, right? Like we're good enough because we're helping. And so if nobody needs my help, I'm not getting any feedback telling me how good I am. And so I'm not validated as a person who exists anymore. I have a sense of non-existence if I don't have that feedback saying, yes, you're here and you did good. Because I feel, if I don't feel seen, I don't feel alive, and I don't feel like I matter at all.
And it sounds like that's a lot of depending on outside influences and outside sources for internal feelings. So how do we turn that around for ourselves? And, you know, we're not going to be perfect, of course, but how do we work toward turning that around for ourselves where we're more reliant on the inside sources and the inside influence for the inside feelings?
I think that's going to be that'll be something, a journey for everyone, right? Permission starts with like, hey, I'm allowed to be a whole person. And my sense of being a whole person is equally important in my care for others, right? So if you feel like you don't have like a life outside of your kids, or that you feel like you don't have anything going on, if you're not needed or getting feedback, if you're noticing those things, take a step outside of your comfort zone and invest in an interest. Think of something that you like. Maybe you want to learn about something that is interesting to you. Maybe you want to like start a hobby of something artistic that you enjoy. Something, maybe you want to, you know, read books about a certain subject or something like that, right? Like it can be anything. But what you're doing is you're nurturing your existence for the sake of it. Not because it does something for anything. It's not a product. It's not an output. It's I exist. I'm a person, and this is my life, and I'm living it in this moment. A good transitional endeavor is plants.
I love plants.
Because they need nurturing too. So guess how many plants I have?
I've been to your house. I know how many plants you have. You probably have more plants than the last time I've been to your house.
I sure do. Right. So we all have our stuff. And so we have to find our own healthy outlets for that. And so as my kids got older and I recognized a lot of things that I maybe wished I could have done differently or had more time to do, or et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Like I'm going through those stages of kids getting olderhood and figuring out what that means for me. I invested in myself, first of all, many years ago, starting the journey of therapy and healing my stuff, right? So that's important. But if that's not where, if you're not there yet, you know, start small. Start by just giving yourself permission to enjoy something just for the sake of it. And it doesn't have anything to do with anyone else. Like just be into it and let that be what it is. That's, I think, the best place to start. And then your reaction to that starting place really tells me what next would be helpful, right? So it's, how hard is that for you? Right? Like, what's your internal narrative about that? What are you telling yourself that says about you? Right? Like, and those types of responses are really the insights that we need in order to start to learn what we've learned about ourselves that maybe isn't true anymore. And it's certainly not useful. So like, if you're trying to do something for yourself and your internal narrative is like, you're a selfish jerk. Okay. Like objectively, that's just not true. So what's happening? This isn't like, apply the word objectively. If what I'm saying is I'm objectively a selfish jerk because I want to spend, you know, a half hour in the morning watering my plants. No, that's not true. Right. So it's like, we assign ourselves these things. So it's really about the narrative that, what is this telling yourself about yourself, and how, and is that objectively true? And if If it feels really true, but you know it's not true, then that's something to work with.
Then you've sort of pinpointed something to work on. Yeah.
Exactly. You've gotten something that like maybe to explore. Why does this feel true for me? Where did I learn this?
Mm-hmm.
Do I still need it to be true to maintain some other aspect of my current dynamic, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what does that look like if I can accept this as not true anymore? Like, how do I change this internal narrative? Or am I ready to change it? And if I'm not ready to change it, then that's okay too. Like I tell people all the time, like, look, this is where we're here. We're where we are.
Right. It's like the map in the mall. You are here.
Yeah.
You know, the dot.
Yeah. Yeah. And that doesn't mean, you can't go somewhere, but we can't teleport there. It takes time. Like we're where we are because we need to be there. And if we are holding on to beliefs about ourselves or beliefs about the world that we know are not true, but feel incredibly true, that indicates that belief holds a purpose in your current life, in your dynamic of survival that you have. Sometimes we have to believe that we're, that our sole purpose is to be a mother in order to, dismiss our own feelings of lack of nurturing, like in order to dismiss our own needs. Mm-hmm. We believe that this is our motherhood. But that's the lie we're telling ourselves in order to protect ourselves from our feelings of sadness and grief that we didn't have a life of our own.
Right.
So those beliefs mean something. And we just have to explore them and learn about what we really think.
And I love how you said, think about that. Like, where did I learn that?
Yes.
Kind of travel down that road, because I feel like the best way of, getting over something is really looking at it head on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And if you can't know where you learned it right now, that's okay. You don't have to you don't have to go on like any kind of expedition, right? But just if you notice it and you're like, I must have learned this, just know that you learned it somewhere. Mm-hmm. And that it has the opportunity to change. It doesn't have to always be true. And if it feels urgently dangerous to change it, then don't change it. Go talk to somebody. Because that indicates that it's part of a core structural survival strategy. So if it feels too big to just be like, oh, that's not real, then maybe that's worth additional support. But most of the time it won't. Most of the time it's just like, oh, like your realization about oh, I don't have to be stressed.
Right.
I have permission to enjoy this. I didn't know that. Now I do. I can do it, right? So most of the time it's like that. So just ask yourself.
It's hard sometimes when you're sitting in it. And I know you don't mean it to sound so easy, because it's not so easy. But
it's not easy at all. It's super hard.
All. It's so hard, especially when you're sitting in it and it's, and we kind of have a clouded vision, I think, oftentimes of what motivates us to do things, think certain ways, and
for sure.
and act certain ways. And so it can be really tough for me. And I don't know if it can be really tough for you too, with all of your background and all the therapy you've been through, and the fact that you now help other people through this. I mean, is it just as hard to see yourself? Yeah,
it really is. I mean, I'm talking about the stuff I'm talking about with my kids. Like, this is like present day. These are not stories from the past. Like, my son is almost 20. My second son is almost 18. So I'm in this space of did I do a good enough job? Right? Do they have what they need? Are they, and then also then what? And then does it make me a jerk if I go move to an island when they all move out? Because I didn't move to an island and have them live on an island? Does that, right? If I enjoy my life after they're gone from my home, does that make me a jerk because I didn't take them on all these vacations that I plan on going on, right? Like, so those are the kinds of things I'm thinking about. And objectively, no, right? Objectively, no, it doesn't make me a jerk. But those are thoughts that we have. And those are thoughts that are worth, allowing and giving ourselves permission to have. And then also reconciling with, because like I said, none of us are 100% anything. What we can be, though, is 100% aligned with that. It's okay to not have 100% like commitment to something, right? Like we often have conflicting thoughts and ideas, and that's okay. And then can we let those be just there and let that be that, this feels scary, but I'm going to do it anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Like I say all the time, difficult, not dangerous. And so when we think about exploring the world and who we might be in it outside of the context of our relationships, that's difficult, but it's not dangerous. And no one's asking anybody to change right in that moment. It's a brainstorm sesh.
Mm-hmm.
It's thought experiments only. So we don't have to put this pressure on ourselves to like solve the whole thing and do something differently in that moment. We don't. These are thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
And so we want to give ourselves permission to experience these ideas and thoughts and just not push them away or feel like it's such an emergency.
Right. Give it some time.
Yeah. Let it be a process.
Do you, and maybe this isn't the case for your particular clients, but do you see moms that are going through this transition where baby's leaving the nest fall into a sort of depression and they're not really sure what that's all about?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that is something that it's like empty nesting, right? Like that's a whole thing. And because we do have this sense of purpose that's tied up in our parenting and there's some grief. Part of the grief is the objective truth that the person is just not in our life every single day anymore. But part of the grief is that we can't change it. The outcome is it's over.
It is. It's done.
Childhood is over. There's an end date on that. And there's no going back. You can't rewrite the outcomes.
Mm-hmm. Or rewrite the past.
Right.
Which I think a lot of times we get hung up on. Oh, I didn't spend enough time doing this.
Right.
Oh, I spent too much time doing that. And I should have just not worried about the dishes and sat on the floor and played cars or whatever the case may be. I actually deal with a lot of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so that spiral can feel really depressing, right? Like that can make you feel really helpless and hopeless, maybe angry, maybe lonely. A lot of things. I think also sometimes there's resentment of like, they don't want to spend time with me and I gave them all this and now what? So that's another hard thing about parenting is that there's not really a guaranteed return on your investment. Like
right.
This is a one-way relationship. You don't get a guarantee that they're going to like you, that they're going to respect you, that they're going to spend any time with you in the future. And that's your gift. You gave that away.
Mm-hmm.
That's hard.
It's real hard. And then I can see how, some moms sort of try to shoehorn themselves into their adult child's life by getting involved in their relationships.
Right.
And getting involved in when it's time for them to have a baby. And then it just snowballs from there. And I feel like it can. I mean, I know some people who have really wonderful relationships with their parents and their in-laws and and it's very close and tight like that. But I also know some that it's completely destroyed their relationships too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we have to be able to set those boundaries with ourselves as adults, like, and with our kids and with, I mean, that's the thing about this individuation from the beginning, right? When we're starting to see our kids get old enough to have some autonomy, have some responsibility, and they're taking that on, and they're being held accountable, and they're recognizing, and they're allowed to make decisions outside of your decisions. So they're developing a sense of self, and a developed sense of self is a boundary between you and them. And that's important. And so we have to allow for that, and we have to be okay with that. And so the more we can develop a sense of ourself and have a boundary between us and them, the more they'll be able to do the same, and we won't be so hurt by it, because it's not personal, it's literal life.
Yeah.
It's actually the human design. It's because they have to go out and find more people and make more people.
Right.
Otherwise, there wouldn't be any more people.
Right. And we have a real problem.
So the differentiation, the leaving, is by design. We have to reconcile with that. It's not personal.
I love that you said that. I think it was so perfectly stated. And I think a lot of times we don't think about that. I know I don't. You know, I'm terrified for him to leave the nest. I'll be honest completely with you. And I don't think, well, that's just life and how things go, and they need to, otherwise we'd have a real problem. I just love how you put it into something easy to understand like that. So thank you.
Yeah. And that doesn't make it not scary. It's still scary.
Yeah, it is.
But it's okay.
Yeah. I feel like I needed to have another one. I don't know if that changes. If I had another one, would I not be so darn terrified? Would I be like, yeah, kid, bye. You know what I mean? At 18?
I don't know the answer to that, because I have so many. I just think they're, but I also think the more you recognize that they are capable, and the more you give them credit for their capability, the more they will see that too. And the closer and more authentic your relationship is, because you're not dependent on their dependence.
Right.
Kids really hate that.
They really hate that. They really hate that at 9.
Yeah. They don't like it at all when your like happiness depends on their connection to you and their, reaction to you, or their sense of their own happiness, right? Like that really makes kids upset. There's a lot of resentment there, actually. So what we want is to build them up into a healthy person with a healthy relationship to their self and a healthy relationship to you. And we want to build our own healthy relationship to ourselves so that we can have a healthy relationship to them. And it just starts with recognizing that sometimes stuff is uncomfortable, and that's okay. Difficult, not dangerous.
Right. And we can do hard things. We
can do hard things.
And so can they.
They can. They're more capable than we think they are. And that's hard. That's
definitely hard. I think we get tripped up, myself included, a lot on that.
Yeah.
On the fact that, well, we know better because we've been around longer and we have better systems, and like we know the tricks, and you know what I mean? But not helpful.
It's not helpful. Like, I have this like amazingly efficient system, and like you're doing it the hard way, and I'm just going to do my way. But I've been saying this a lot lately too. When has anyone ever learned from like advice?
Not typically. I mean, it can expand your mind, right?
Totally.
But
most of the time we learn things the hard way. Like we have to do it. Yeah. We have to do it. We can't have someone do it for us, because then that changes the way that our brain conceptualizes it and makes sense of it. And so we have to let our brain learn the process in the same way that we learned the process. It doesn't have to be as traumatic if we can help it, right? Like, but they still have to they have to learn by doing. So we have to be able to tolerate that they're not going to do it the easy way or the perfect way or the right way, quote unquote, whatever that looks like. Whether it's, spreading the peanut butter, or, handling your first conflict with like a coworker, right? Like they're going to mess it up sometimes, and that's okay. And they'll be fine. And so
In the
will you.
end, they will be fine. And so will we.
So
And
will
that's the
you.
thing that I think is really important to remember too, is even though we're as old as we are, it's still a learning process. I've always heard even like older people say, hey, I've learned, I'm 80 something years old and I still learn something every day.
Yeah.
It just isn't over.
Yeah. We have to be ready to learn more and to not know and to allow there to be something different than what we thought it was going to be.
Mm-hmm. Totally agree.
And that's kind of hard.
It's real hard.
Yeah.
And I
But that's
think,
why we have friends. And that's why we talk to other people about the things that are hard, right? Adults need adult support. And so when you're going through these hard times, you have other moms to talk to and to connect with and to vent,
and
that's
sometimes
necessary.
that's super therapeutic all in and of itself. And you're not even getting advice or you're not even, making
Yeah.
any changes, but just to be able to say, this is how I feel. And for them to say, yeah, you're human. Me too. Sometime.
Right.
It just makes a huge difference.
Yeah. Like I tell parents sometimes the same is true for their kids. Like sometimes you just need to co-sign on their rage. Like if somebody's really pissed because something happened, and even though you don't think it's a big deal, or even if you think it was slightly their fault that it happened in the first place, like none of that's helpful. Just
Right.
co-sign. Yeah. Like what? That sucks. That's the worst. Like I feel that. And now what are we going to do about it together?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like it's like, just let them be mad about it. Be mad. Everybody gets mad.
I love that you said that because, and this sometimes happens in my household. I won't name any names, but sometimes and I've probably done it before too. I just don't recognize it if I do. The words, oh, you shouldn't feel like that. Oh, don't be upset.
Yeah.
And then I feel like that's a little debilitating and we should. And then what happens later on in life when we're in that routine of not feeling our feelings? Now we're really screwed. You know what I mean? Because it's important to feel your feelings.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think a good, is that it's okay to be upset. It makes sense that you're upset and you won't, we'll get through it together, like it's okay to be upset. Like sometimes when we don't allow others to be upset in our presence, that's more about us.
Yeah.
Right. Like we can't tolerate that. That's hard for us to see and tolerate. We don't know what to do. Like who knows what to do when somebody's like super upset and you're like sitting with them and you're like, I don't know what to do. Like,
right.
I don't know what to do. So we say like, it's okay. We try to, so we have, that's us. That's us trying to help ourselves feel better. And, we can let somebody be upset and be like, I'm right here. That is really upsetting. And I've got you. And if it's something where we have to keep moving, like, I know that this is really upsetting. And that's okay. And even though it's that upsetting, we still have to keep going. So like, we're going to bring it with us. Let's go.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like, I don't need to stop to like make the upsetness go away. Bring it. We're still going. Right? Like we're
still moving forward. Yeah.
Yeah. It's going to come along with us and that's fine. It'll deal with itself later. Like but bring it along.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. Like permission to have experiences and feelings.
Parenting, man.
So hard. Ugh.
So hard. And, it would be really nice if when you got pregnant and not necessarily when you got pregnant, but when you baby had and you're in the hospital and they're scaring the crap out of you with all the like crib death movies and, they're doing all, oh goodness. You didn't have that when you had your kids?
No.
Or, I mean,
to
I know
put things in perspective, I had my kids before there were iPhones. So,
oh, well, so maybe that's why. But when I had mine, we couldn't leave the hospital with him until we watched these movies that just scare the living tar out of you. Yeah, we couldn't leave. They were like holding us prisoner.
That's really awful.
But I wish with all of that and with the hearing test and the eye test and everything, they just handed you a handbook and it was like, here's your parenting manual. It's everything you need to know. Like, where is this? We need one of these.
I know. And unfortunately, because there are so many perspectives that are okay enough to make it to be successful, there's no one book. But I also think that's hopeful. There's enough strategies out there that are good enough to make it.
Right. Right.
We're good enough. We're doing good enough. We
Yeah.
don't have to know all the things. We know them when we learn them, and then we do them differently.
I think a lot more of us would feel a bit better about ourselves if we recognize that.
I think so too. There's a lot of good enough ways to do it.
There's a lot. And throughout this episode, so it's time. It's the end.
I can't.
I know. And throughout this episode, I think I came up with like 4 more topics.
Yeah, for sure.
We can talk for an hour on.
A lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So thank you again, as always, for being here. If any of our listeners, audience members want to get in touch, connect with you, that sort of thing, what's the best way to do it?
You can find me at Benaviri on all the socials, BENAVIERI, and benaviri.com. And you can get me there.
Awesome. And for those of you who want to check out our playlist that we have on our YouTube channel with all of our past episodes, we're coming up on 2 years now, guys. So Laura and I have had a lot of hours of talking, and it's been
a lot.
Yes, a lot. And it's been absolutely wonderful for me. I know you're phenomenal. I love the way you break things down. I love how easy to understand you make things, and you have done that since the beginning. So if you guys want to check that out, see more of Laura's amazing expertise, then hop on over to our YouTube channel. It is at MOMnation USA. That is our handle. Scroll down just a little bit and you will see the mental wealth playlist. And that has all of our previous episodes. Or if you are more of the podcast listener, like everybody knows, I think by now, that I love laundry. I know it's weird, but when Laura's like, come over to my house, I have 4 boys or 3 boys.
I mean,
yeah. So anyway, I love to listen to podcasts while I'm folding, washing, drying, hanging, ironing, like all of that jazz. So if you are like me and that is your thing, hop on over to your favorite podcast platform, do a quick search for MOMnation Talk Radio. That will connect you with our channel. You will see us on mental wealth once a month, along with a variety of other shows that you should check out too.
Yep.
All righty. Till next time.
Subscribe. Don't miss it.
Don't miss it. Hit the bell.
All right. This is so fun as always.
As always. Good to see you.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.